Okay, so today we're going to look at the point slope form in your guys' Unit 5 books. We're on page 13 right now. And we're going to be working obviously with something called point slope. So before we've been working with equations that have been in what you guys can see is the slope intercept form, okay, where you guys also know it as y equals mx plus b, right? So what we're going to go from here is that this equation consists of the slope and the y-intercept. So now what we're going to be looking at, let me get this light on, is the idea is what if we're given a point and a slope instead of a slope and an intercept. So we're going to dive in just a little bit deeper to there. All right, so we want to explore a line whose slope is 2/3. So again, this is your rise of 2 and this is going to be your run right of 3, and it passes through the point 4, 5. Okay. So before we can use our slope of rising 2 and running 3 to the right, we have to have somewhere to begin with. So question A, well, statement A says that on the grid below, draw the line. The point 4, 5 has already been plotted. So what they're telling you is that they went over right 4 and up to 5 and they plotted this dot. Okay. So now in order to be able to draw the line, we need the slope, which is 2, 3. So now I'm going to rise 2, run 3. Rise 2, run 3. And to get a few that are going backwards, I'm going to do just the opposite. Instead of going up 2, I'm going to go down 2 and back 3 to get the ones behind it. Generally, we always go to the right. Generally, I never go to the left unless I have to. Okay, so I'm going to grab a straight edge. I'm going to connect these the best that I can. And don't forget that you should probably always label your line. So I'm going to label this, okay, with y equals. I'm going to leave it right there for right now, okay? Because the next question asks you, between what two consecutive integers must the y-intercept on this line fall? Okay, so two consecutive integers. 2 meaning between what two numbers? Consecutive means one after the other. So first we have to be able to identify the y-intercept. So I'm going to look at this, the y-intercept, and it's right there. Obviously, that is not a whole number. So it is somewhere in between, well, let's count. 1, 2, 3. It's somewhere in between 2 and 3. So when it asks you between what two consecutive integers the y-intercept falls, it's between 2 and 3. Right, so that's all they were asking for that question. Right. So when we go to write the equation, I had started it, but my problem was that I don't know exactly what the y-intercept is. So therefore, I'm just going to leave it as a question mark. Okay. So now I'm going to read C. The point -8, -3 lies on this line. So I'm going to use -8, -3. I'm going to go there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, down. 1, 2, 3. Yep, it most certainly does. There's the point, -8, -3. And so does this point that we already saw before. So they're asking us to consider these 2 points, and using the slope formula, find the slope. Okay, so if you don't know what the slope formula is, we'll try to write it. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you want to be careful when we're doing this. They give us these 2 points here. So this one's x1, this one's y1. The 4 is the x2, and the 5 is the y2. So when I'm using this slope formula, I want to make sure that I'm using parentheses because of the sign errors that we make. So I'm going to do y1 and y2 and put a minus sign in between them. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Here's x2 minus x1. So as I'm filling in these numbers, please make sure you know that the signs go with them. y2 is 5, y1 is negative 3, x2 is 4, x1 is negative 8. Okay. So if you need to, do this into your calculator. 5 minus a negative 3 becomes 8. And 4 minus a negative 8 is 12. Well, this does not look like the slope that we had way up here. Well, it technically is. If you take both of these numbers and reduce them by dividing by 4, you get that 2 over 3. And that's the slope that matches here. And this makes sense because if the points are on the line, it has that constant rate of change, up to right 3, up to right 3, up to right 3, up to right 3, up to right 3. So it's a constant rate of change. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip D, and I'm going to skip E. I don't want to do these two questions. Now we're going to really talk about that idea of the point slope form. So I'm going to move to the next page, page 14. And I want to take a look at the up top portion where they actually gave you the point slope form of a line. Here it is. Okay. So where obviously we already know that M is the slope. M is the slope. And the 2 points that they give you are obviously the x1 and the y1. So notice that these were positives, but they have minus signs here. That's not to say that those 2 points are negative. It's saying that we're using a minus sign in this formula like we did the slope formula. Okay. So when I'm going to write these into the equations, the y's and the x that are in this equation are going to stay the same. What's going to change is the x1 and the y1. So I'm going to write it as such. Y minus, and then there's the y1, equals m x minus x1. So it's in these parentheses that I'm going to actually substitute the x1 and the y1. Right? So I'm going to plug those in now. I'm going to do y minus, remember this is x1, this is y1, and that's your slope, and that's what m is. So we're going to do y minus 5 equals 4 x minus 7. Okay. Once I'm assured that there's going to be no sign change, I can just rewrite it into the real form. Okay, so technically I've distributed the negative sign through the parenthesis, and again here the negative sign through the parenthesis to give me this as my final answer. So this is what point slope form looks like because we're using a point and we're using a slope, no longer the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so then I'm going to do the same thing on B. Okay, so we have to remember that the formula is y minus y1 equals, and this is where I'm going to put my m, x minus x1. Okay. This being x1, this being y1, and this obviously the slope. So I'm going to fill this in. Y minus 5 equals the slope, which is negative 1/2, parenthesis, x minus x1. Okay. So over here nothing's going to really happen because a negative times a positive is going to give you that negative. So we rewrite this as y minus 5. Keep the negative 1/2. And then here though, this is where why I use the parentheses, because a negative times a negative will actually turn this to a positive. So when one of these digits for the x1 or the y1 are negative, it's going to change the sign from the original formula from a minus sign to a positive sign. Okay, so I'll practice with this one without writing all the parentheses. Okay, so y minus y1 equals the slope, parenthesis, x minus x1. Okay, so again here I wind up with that double negative. So it turns it to a positive. So it kind of essentially just takes it and makes it to the opposite sign. Okay. -2. And then here is a negative times a positive. So it stays as a negative, but now it's a minus sign when it's in between. Okay, I'm going to do the last one. I'm going to do this one a little bit quicker. Okay, y minus y1 equals the slope, parenthesis, x minus x1. Okay, if you need to label the x1 and the y1, please do so that you can keep them straight. Double negative creates that positive. And here again, double negative creates a positive. Okay. So if we're looking at and we're comparing the points to the point slope form, here those are the numbers. It's the 5 and just the 7. Okay. Here, yes, it's the 5, but here they're opposite signs. Okay. And then here, this is the opposite, and this is the opposite. Okay, so you're basically taking the opposites because of the minus signs will change their signs. So again, here's the opposite, and then here's the opposite. So just realized in number C I made a mistake. I plugged in, this should be 5, and this should be 7. Alright, so now for extra credit, if you would like to do so, on page 15 and 16 in your books. Now if you want the extra credit, you can do so. If you do not want the extra credit, don't worry about it. For right now, if you guys want to work on just 1, 2, and 3, due by Wednesday. Okay, thank you for watching the video.